Hi, good afternoon everyone. I'm Viv Groskop, writer and comedian, and welcome to an open letter to the women who will run the world with Jennifer Palmieri. I am so thrilled to be here today with Jennifer. I'm hoping that maybe the woman who will rule the world is indeed in this room, or perhaps watching online. We're live from the RSA in London. If I could ask our audience here in the room to turn off their mobile phones, or at least put them to silent, because we don't mind if you participate on social media. We'd love you to. The hashtag is RSA Power. Welcome also to our global audience. We're live streaming online, so please do join in with questions and comments. Today's speaker, Jennifer Palmieri, was the Director of Communications for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Prior to that, she served as the White House Communications Director for President Barack Obama. Now, in her new book, Dear Madam President, she argues that all across the world, women are rising to incredible heights of leadership, and one day, one of them will be America's first woman president. The book is a guide for all women seeking to cast off a man's version of how a woman leader should act, talk, and dress. Jennifer will be presenting her call to arms everywhere, her call to arms to women everywhere from this lectern. Then we'll be speaking briefly in conversation before throwing this event open to questions from you in the room and to everyone online. So please welcome the author of Dear Madam President, Jennifer Palmieri.
Thank you, Viv. It's really it's an honor to be here, and I'm also just thrilled to be in London, and there's a country that has a woman leader here, which is inspiring. I'm going to tell you something new and different, something I haven't ever seen, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about different. Take you through a little bit of an arc of the book and my experience in working both for Hillary and also for President Obama, who I think as our first black president, I learned a lot about empathy, a lot about leadership from watching him. And then Viv and I will have a conversation and take questions from you all too. And I wrote this book because I wanted, I think, like a lot of people that go through difficult things, you want something positive to come out of the experience from the 2016 campaign. And I felt that I had seen obstacles that a woman operating on the world stage encounters, and then also in my own life, because I had worked in 2 decades of politics. At the national level, I worked for President Clinton for 8 years, was there for all 8 years. And as a young woman in my 20s, and then for President Obama and for Hillary, and also my sister passed away last year from early onset Alzheimer's, which is like the worst diagnosis, right, anyone can get. And a good friend of mine, Elizabeth Edwards, who had been married to John Edwards, who's a presidential candidate, and had lost a child, had a very public, her marriage dissolved in a very public way, and then also had a terminal illness. And between Hillary's experiences, my sister, and Elizabeth, I felt that I had watched women do very hard things. I understood there were still obstacles that we faced. But somehow in this moment after Donald Trump had won, I myself and a lot of women in America felt more empowered than ever, which was an odd reaction. And even though my sister got this devastating diagnosis, and even though my friend Elizabeth got this devastating diagnosis, all 4 of us managed in some way to find, to have our life matter and be very meaningful. And that was what I wanted to convey in a very, as Viv, who's read it, can tell you, it's a short book. You can read it in just a couple of hours, maybe 2.5 hours. People read it in one sitting, which I love to hear, and just to share my takeaways from all those experiences and then see what it brings up for you, because I feel, I describe in very vivid detail how it felt to wake up on Wednesday, November 9th. Yeah, sorry, I know. Is PTSD a thing here? Yeah, okay. I know, but it's an important part. It's part of the journey, and I'm very graphic about it because I think a lot of people felt the same way, and I want you to, if you did feel the same way, I want you to recognize that in the book, and if not, to know that this is how people felt, which is, I said it felt to me like it's like the movie scene that you never see, where you don't defuse the bomb just in time, right? But the world actually explodes. Like that is what it felt like, and it felt like I was just hurled into a black hole. And I had a notion that I actually thought my phone might not work. Because, you know, when you go to a different country and your phone doesn't work, if you don't have, like, I thought that's like that's how devastating it felt to me. That's how I felt that I was in this universe that I didn't think was possible. And it's not as if I didn't know intellectually that it was possible for Donald Trump to win, because our own polling showed that there was like a 1 in 3 or a 1 in 4 chance of that. But it's just that the harder the campaign got and the uglier he got, I thought there was some sort of karmic insurance that, like, right? There's some justice in the world, and particularly in my country, that we couldn't possibly be going through all of this like hell that we put ourselves through, that we put Hillary through, only to discover that every moment that we had spent in the last 2 years was some small part that we were all playing in our role to make Donald Trump president of the United States. Like that could not happen. That just couldn't be. And then it did. And you had to decide either, well, maybe women are only meant to go so far in this country. Maybe men like Donald Trump are meant to win. And by the way, the only people I personally know who aren't surprised that Donald Trump won are black in America. They're like, well, yeah, that's the kind of person that wins, in America. And I think that's a small example of how, I have a better understanding of how a lot of Americans that have been living in my country for a long time, that I didn't see how they experience life there do. But most of us didn't, including Trump supporters, didn't expect this to happen. You either had to decide that's who was meant to win, or we got to do things really differently. And that women, I think that Hillary was like a lot of women in the baby boomer generation, which is they had to prove that they could do the job just the same way a man could do it. And she had done that her entire career. But what occurred to me late in the process, like in October of 2016, just sort of in a flash, it became clear to me that, right, what we have done is made her a female facsimile of the qualities that we look for in a male president. And that was a fundamental flaw in the design, right? That's something you're like, wow, I'm sure that's a completely wrong way to do this. And I have no idea what it would look like to do it a different way, because we didn't have any other model. And I also thought this is probably why so many people found her inauthentic, because we're trying to take this ill-fitting suit and jam it on her and present her in ways that showed that she could be the leader that we think of when we think of the president, but that robbed her of a lot of her own qualities and her own authenticity. And it made me just realize, I still thought at that point she was going to win, but I thought, okay, she's the person who will be elected that way by using an old model, but then we're going to have to reimagine a new one. And, and then we find that's not to be. She's not going to make it. She'll get 3 million more votes than him, but she won't make it. Women could decide to have their souls be crushed in that moment, or feel empowered to try things a different way. And the miraculous thing that happened is a lot of women who didn't support him decided to feel empowered, and they turned out, and the Women's March was sort of the first hint of that. The day after his inauguration, where many, many, many millions of people, men and women both, many more people than came to his inauguration, turned out in Washington, D.C., from Anchorage, Alaska, to most cities in the country. I actually went to New Orleans that day. My husband and I went to New Orleans for the Trump inaugural, which I thought was really inspired. It was just, we're going to go someplace fun, but we're not going to get driven out of our country. And I knew there was a women's march in New Orleans, but I decided not to go because I'm a big control freak, and I think I can impact anything, and I wanted this one time to take my hands off the wheel and step back and see how was America going to react. Like, what are you going to do now, America? Like, this guy is president. And was really relieved and amazed to see the reaction, and it hasn't flagged. You saw it, there was the Women's March. There's a record number of women that are running for office now. We had Me Too, which I think is a direct reaction to him. And then we had another Women's March this last January, which had the same kind of numbers. And I see America reacting at a grassroots level to try to reinvigorate our democratic institutions, and that the people at that level, not everyone obviously, because President Trump still has very committed supporters, but that we understand that we need that people are engaging in ways that they haven't before, and that's very reassuring. That's what I see coming out of this. What I learned, with Hillary, we had the notion, I had the sort of epiphany about what we had done, and turning her into this model that's mimicking male qualities. And what I think is at the root of problem for women in America, and why it's harder for America than it is in a country like this one with a parliamentary system. There's another obstacle in America when you are elected by the public at large, and in a parliamentary system where when a woman can actually be appealing one-on-one to the leaders that will elect her to be the head of the party, that's an easier situation. Hillary did very well when she was a senator. She was very popular with her colleagues. She was very popular as a United States senator with people she represented in the state of New York. When she was a candidate for Senate, she was not popular at all. When she was Secretary of State, she was very popular. When she was a candidate for president, she wasn't popular at all. And I think that what at the root of that is some unease we still have with women seeking power. We think women are very competent. We expect them to do good jobs when they are elected to an office. And we expect that they're going to do well in that office. They're doing the job they were given permission to do, and you can count on a woman to fulfill her obligations. But what I had a very telling moment with Hillary's concession speech that everybody loved so much. And I had so many people, press, and even her friends and supporters, come up to me afterwards and say, that was so amazing. Where was this Hillary when it mattered? Why did we have this Hillary when it could have made a difference? And she was so gracious and generous and selfless. I was like, yes, because that's what's acceptable for a woman to do, be a gracious loser. That is, we love that. We love that women are selfless and nurturing, and they put others' interests ahead of everybody else's. And when you're a candidate, here's what you have to do. When you're a candidate for the President of the United States, you have to say, I want the most powerful job on the planet. That is what I'm saying. I want that job. I am the best person for the most powerful job on the planet. And you'll forgive me for saying that being President of the United States is the most powerful job on the planet. And here are all the reasons why I am better than the other guy and he's bad. That is what you're telling a woman to do. And that is hard for a woman to do. And I'm sorry, but people still don't like hearing that from a woman. And I think that's at the root of this unease that people felt about Hillary Clinton, why you would hear people say, there's something about her I just don't like. There's something about her I just don't trust. And I think that's because she's always, her whole career, like a lot of women of her generation, her whole life really, stepped just right outside of the role that women have normally held, roles that they've normally played. So when she was at Wellesley, she gave her commencement address, and she was very challenging to the United States senator who introduced her about the Vietnam War. And they put her on the cover of Life magazine because she was the female face of the baby boomer generation. And it's like, this is this new generation that's coming to take over America. And then the next time we saw her, although nobody realized it was the same person, she was Bill Clinton's wife, he was running for president. She didn't change her name. She made more money than he did. She didn't stay home and bake cookies, and we didn't really know what to make of her. And then she was the first lady that worked on policy, ran for Senate, Secretary of State, ran for president, et cetera. I went back, I was trying to figure out if there was something we could do about this issue, about the likability issue and the trust issue. And I went and watched interviews from the '92 campaign. So these are interviews of her and about her. And they did these man and women on the street interviews. What do you think of Bill Clinton's wife? This is in 1992. There's something about her I just don't like. There's something about her I just don't trust. And this is like before anything. This is before Whitewater. This is before healthcare. This is before emails. This is before anything. And it was very liberating because I thought, I am not solving this problem. In the next 6 months, I'm not figuring out something that's been building up for 25 years. And also, this really doesn't have anything to do with her. Her with Hillary, the person who I know is Hillary Rodham Clinton, who I think of as the woman that wears Coke bottle glasses and not a lot of makeup, and is a very good friend, somebody who wants to solve problems. On my first day of the campaign, she sat me down to sort of just like vomit up what it had been like to be her for the previous 25 years. She just went through everything from why she didn't change her name initially. Her husband had to ask her numerous times to marry him because she was worried that she would get lost in his world because he was such a big personality and was so clear about where he was going, and she wasn't so sure she knew, and that was why she maintained Rodham for a long time, because she wanted to try to sort out for herself what she wanted. Then eventually changing her name, and all of the campaigns that they went through together, and times where the public liked her, times where they didn't. And she said, I don't know what to make of all of it, but I just want you to be aware of it because you're going to encounter all of this when trying to represent me to the press and public. And at the end, she said, I'm just a simple and serious person, and I don't understand why I provoke such rage in people. And I was like, oh. And it still brings tears to my eyes because, as I say in the book, it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry in public even, because it's just something that this is what I'm expressing is something that's really important to me and moves me to tears, and that's something I should share. But she, you thought, she's like, I don't understand any of it. I don't understand the people that hate me, and I don't even really understand some of the people that really love me, because it's neither one reflected who she really is. And I have come to think that maybe that was destined for a woman that was always breaking barriers, and that there's no model to compare to, which brings me to her story. So I have a chapter in the book called Her Story. I know today you have this unveiling of a suffragette from your country, Millicent Fawcett, right? Is that, yeah. So, and it's the first, you're telling me it's the first statue in Parliamentary Square of a woman. Not like we're doing great. There's one statue in Congress of Janet Raskin, who's the first woman elected to the United States Congress from the state of Montana. But what was really a really remarkable thing in the campaign was that Hillary Clinton didn't think she had a story. She said, my husband has a story. President Obama has a story. But I don't. I don't have anything interesting in my background that people can relate to or find compelling, and which is sort of remarkable given her life's history. But it's true that in America, anyway, we want the stories of our president. We want our president's life stories to reflect elements of the American dream. So that was true for Bill Clinton, right? He was from Hope. He was from a town called Hope, and he pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and his father was killed before he was even born, but he was this brilliant young man that was able to succeed and rise up and become president of the United States. And then we had Barack Hussein Obama, a black man raised in a white family that managed to, he was going to bring us hope and change, and he fulfilled a promise in America, and he made us proud that we elected him. And those are stories we like and recognize. And if I say in that first chapter, the future is female, the past is too. It's just no one thought it was important enough to write it all down, right? It's insane. And it's only in this new universe that I live in that I really see these things, but that there's just no record of women's stories it's literally insane that there is not an appreciation or record of that. And that is, I think that's the thing with Hillary is, she was making history. She was making her story. And it is the women who come after her now we will recognize their life story as something important and remarkable, and hers will be the model that other people can build on. I think the next woman's going to have an easier time that runs than she did, and that is it's taken me a long time to come to terms with that, but I think that's her sort of gift to us, and that I want to make sure we make the most of. And then I'll just say one thing about America, because I know there's just some anxiety about it. I think that the 2016 campaign was a reckoning that was probably a long time coming because of all of this disruption, change, frustration that's been under the surface in America for a long time. And we had enormous changes with our economy, 2 wars, 9/11, a digital economy dawning, big demographic changes, and that just roiled to the surface. And every day on the campaign trail, I saw something very troubling, very unusual that could tell me Donald Trump could be president. And it's not, it was like all demographics were sort of riling up. And the one, I believe that there's a 38% chance that America's best days are behind us and we could disintegrate into a pit of fiery racial hatred, and a 62% chance that we won't. So if you believe in the 62% chance, then that means you have to find that there's something that bonds all of us together. And I believe that everyone who is dissatisfied in America, the one thing that unites them is a notion that America should be better than it is in this moment, and is capable of that. And they want that, and they're demanding that, and that's something to build on. And I think Donald Trump is disruption that has come to American politics the way Uber drivers came to taxis, to show that the system was broken and needs to be revitalized, that people were treating politics like a game, and he took it and he perverted the game to where a president can be elected president of the United States built on a strategy of dividing Americans rather than trying to find a way to bring people together. And what's reassuring is I do see all of these green shoots at the grassroots level of people that are coming up and engaging in politics and revitalizing it and making it their own. And that is why I think this is like many years to undo the damage that a Trump presidency has done. I'm ultimately hopeful. So, and then with that, we'll do the fifth presentation. Thanks.
Wow, Jennifer, thank you so much. And thanks so much, not only for your openness in writing this book, which is quite raw, but for your openness in speaking as well. You say in the book that you're a very kind of teary person.
I am.
In the White House under Barack Obama, you had the crying room.
My office was called the crying room, yes.
Right.
Yeah, it was a place because somebody told me that they read a book where it told women that they should dig the stiletto part of their heel into their foot at work to prevent themselves from crying. I was like, oh yeah, because that seemed like a natural thing to do.
Wow.
And I wouldn't stop openly, but I get But sometimes you're frustrated, and that's like anger. Some people get angry, some people cry, and they're frustrated. But moreover, I am easily moved to tears. And sometimes, you hear people say, "I was going to say something, but I couldn't get through it without crying, so I didn't say that." And I think, wow, that probably was something really important. That's something that probably really means a lot to you, and we would benefit from hearing it. And I don't think, certainly in America, there's no one who thinks, wow, we have all the answers that we need. We have all the perspectives that we need to solve all the problems and to bridge divisions. Nobody thinks that. And if we're like bringing more of ourselves and like expressing things that really move us, I think that it could help.
Did Hillary Clinton use the crying room?
No, because she.
I just can't see it. That's all.
Because she wasn't there. This is in the White House. She didn't get there, so that didn't work out. But I did. When I would see her cry, it was when she was talking about something that moved her. It was usually talking about her mom. Her mother had this really difficult, awful childhood, and it was a big motivating factor for her. So she would tear up. I didn't see her tear up out of like anger or frustration or sadness about something with herself, but I would see her talking with Mothers in the Movement, which is like a group of women who lost their children to gun violence. That those are the kind of things that made her cry.
And you were mentioning this idea that throughout Hillary's career, this phrase, "There's just something about her I don't like," has followed her around, and you discuss this at length in the book. It's fascinating. I think there's a grain of truth there, but I also wonder if this is an American thing, because as you mentioned, we've had not one but two female prime ministers, and this idea of "there's just something about her that I don't like" doesn't seem to bother us here. We elect them anyway.
But is there still something about her you just don't like? There is, isn't there?
I mean, we don't, whatever we think of these women, I don't think that comes into the equation quite so much. Yeah. Do you think that it's something to do with American democracy or American culture? That
I would say Hillary has thought a lot about this. She really thinks that a parliamentary system is better suited for a woman because it, at some level you're still voting. At some level your elections become national and people are voting for Theresa May. But she just thinks that the hurdles are not as big because you're able to work with a smaller group of men and women to get you into the party leadership. But there could be something, it could be something deeper in America. I'm not, there's like a less, I think that we lived under, I certainly did. I didn't think it was that big of a deal until like the first woman president. I didn't think it was going to be that hard or that big of a deal, because we elected the first black president. And I think a lot of people in America, gender bias isn't gender biased, right? So everybody holds it in their head and aren't as aware as they should be that I think we like to congratulate ourselves in America that we're super forward thinking, and maybe not so much.
Yeah, to play devil's advocate as well, because I suspect we're all amongst friends here and preaching to the converted probably online, although who knows, maybe Melania is watching, I hope so, digging her stiletto furiously into her foot to hold back the tears.
She's at the French, oh no, that's not yet, because the time change is different. She has a French state dinner tonight.
Oh, okay, well, she can watch this while she's getting ready, maybe. But I'm wondering if you're wrong in the sense that this was about the fact that Hillary's a woman. And the whole book is predicated on the idea that we find women's leadership difficult. We're not willing to accept the improvisation and the experimentation that it would take to find a woman. The women that we've had as leaders in this country, the one thing they have not shared with Hillary Clinton is the idea that their spouse had been leader. Mm-hmm. Right. And the whole history and baggage that came with that. Right. Do you think it's not so much that Hillary was a woman, it's that not this woman, as you discussed many times in the book?
It is not as if Hillary is, she's a human and she has flaws, and the Clintons brought 40 years of, history, and, I would say history, some people would say baggage, with them. So that is, it's a lot. And I don't know if a woman, but I'm just skeptical I'm skeptical about it. I'm really skeptical when I hear I'm a woman, not just this woman. And I do think that that person who says that really believes that they would vote for a woman. But I just worry about what happens to whatever woman ends up as a nominee, what kind of fire they draw, right? So it's possible a different woman could have drawn less fire than Hillary did because she came with so much. But I still think a woman probably would have drawn a lot. During the 2008 campaign, I didn't really engage in that because I had so many, like Obama and Clinton and John Edwards, so I just kind of stayed, like all these people I liked, I stayed sort of neutral. But it would frustrate me when I would hear the Obama supporters say, well, the problem with Clinton is she's like so, she's so polarizing. I was like, yeah, because that's what happens to Democrats who win. Because Democrat, you get attacked, and if either they kill you off or you accrue battle scars, and and the same thing happened to President Obama. Once he won, right, he got attacked a lot. His popularity went down, and so it happens to the people in the public eye. A different woman could have had an easier time than Hillary, and I don't think she necessarily lost because I don't say she lost because she was a woman. In some ways, she won, right? She got 3 million more votes. But even if she had won, we'd still have these problems.
Absolutely. I love the part where you talk about the Clintons in 2015 in the book when they were preparing for this campaign. And I'm not sure whether this is with hindsight that you realize this or it was clear at the time, but they sensed that there was something going wrong, didn't they? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's surprising, I think, to people because the sense is that, that we had no idea that America was in an uproar. But in the fall of 2015, we had a debate prep session for the primary debates, and both Clintons were very deeply troubled by what they saw as the disaffection in the country, and they said that they had never seen anything like it, and it really troubled them. And I told them that I thought that they were mistaken because they had not really engaged in the 2010 or 2012 elections. 2010 was a really difficult year for Democrats, and after there was as always happens, there was a reaction after Obama had been elected, and people didn't like health care, and we'd had the Great Recession, and that was a really hard year. And 12 was a little bit better, and I thought the economy was getting better, and 16 would be better yet. And they were both like, no, we've never seen anything like this. This is just people have a lack of hope that we've never seen in America. And it's sort of sobering when Bill Clinton tells you he's seen something that hasn't happened in American politics before. And then we had another session with them in February after we lost the New Hampshire primary by 22 points, which was really brutal. And, said it again. And at that time, I believed them. That time I was like, you're right. This is something I have never seen. And I think they actually told us, and I would recommend this book in addition to my own. There is a book they told me to read, which I did, called True Believer. It was written by Erich Hoffer. It was written in the 50s. He was a German immigrant who came to the United States. And it's about the rise of mass movements and authoritarian leaders. I see some folks nodding. Yeah, have you read it? Yeah, so it's very troubling because I saw elements of America reflected in there, and I saw elements of Donald Trump. And basically what it says is that when a country is going through a time of crisis, whether that's a war or a famine, people feel like they have purpose and value because they're trying to survive the war and they're working in a community to do that, or they're living in a poverty and in a famine and they're just getting by. And it's years afterwards where things are getting better, but maybe not for everyone or not fast enough, that all of those frustrations come roiling to the surface. And people are then vulnerable to a leader like in my mind, like Trump, who tells them a story of glory in which they are reflected in the story that they want to hear about their lives. And there's not a cohesive ideology behind it. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but they get value from it. And I was like, I read that and I thought, wow, could that possibly be happening here? And that is why, some people say, well, why didn't you have more of an economic argument? And why didn't you try to talk to these pockets of the country that where big Trump supporters were? And what I found was by the time we got to those pockets of the country during the Clinton campaign, it was way too late. Those people were gone. They could not hear anything Hillary had to say. And she would try to listen in addition to talk, and it was too late. And at that point, you got to run the campaign you're capable of running, which was, let's try to get, this country. We realized that the campaign was not about the economy. It was about what kind of country is America going to be, something much more fundamental. And that is when we, decided we have to just try to rile as many people as we can to our side who understand what's at stake here and try to fend this off, because you were not going to be able to convince the people that were that deeply frustrated that she could do something different.
You argue, and you mentioned in your speech just now, and you argue in the book, that politics has completely changed. And for people of a certain generation, the political landscape that, as we know it, all over the world has completely changed, and, for all kinds of complicated reasons. With that in mind, is there anything you could have done to change how the campaign was run or how it was received? Or is it that this is a new political era now where people can just come out of nowhere and it's very, very difficult to predict things, and you just need to be a lot more nimble to try and keep ahead of the game?
Right. The thing I think, the one thing I would have done differently is this is like a small tactical thing, is there are states in America that I think are changing a lot, that if we had invested time in them very early on, you could have won, which are Arizona, Texas, and Georgia. So just to remind everyone, the 3 states that we lost that was so devastating were Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, states that Democrats usually win, but states that are very old, very white, and more conservative, and growing so each of those things each day. I think that a Democrat can win those 3 states, but Texas, Arizona, and Georgia are places that are really changing, dynamic, a lot of incoming, people moving from other parts of the country to those places. They're much more diverse, and I think that's where our future lies. But that is all tactics. The thing that I think you can do, the thing that I think the next Democratic nominee has to do is find a way that every person in America feels listened to, whether they're going to vote for you or not, and that you have a solution, an economic solution that is going to, so that person can see what you're going to do and imagine their future in it, and that they know that whether or not they're going to vote for you, you believe they have a place in this country, in our country. I think that's what people are going to want. I think even the Democratic Party, what we're going to want is somebody who can unite everyone, and I think that's what the country is going to want. But as we know, I've been wrong before, so I don't know. That's what I think.
We've all been wrong before. You mentioned that Hillary Clinton describes herself as simple and serious, which I thought was very sweet.
I know.
I'm not sure I would use those 2 words to describe her. She's definitely serious, but she's very complex.
Yeah.
What is the most common misconception about Hillary Clinton that you've observed from years of working with her?
So she's simple in that she's direct, and that she's not like, for all the grief that she gets about being inauthentic, the truth is she's terrible at faking it, right? She's terrible at this. This is why, she gets that look on her face, it's like where she's like that, that like I'm talking about, like when somebody's asked her questions and she's like, that's really incredibly stupid. Wow, I find that really offensive. And she's just like, she's actually terrible, she's terrible at faking it. Like, you see what she is? It's like very plain what she is, and she just doesn't have a lot of time for pretense, and she's serious in that she really wants to solve problems. Like, that's why she's in the game and what motivates her. And that, I think, is the big misunderstanding about her, is that she hides her true self. I think it's like what she's bad at is pretending to be somebody she's not. That's what she's bad at. And the other thing is that this notion that she had like some lifelong dream to be the first woman president, that's like not at all what happened, and came into it with a lot of trepidation. Because she's been herself her whole adult life. She knows what happens.
Right, well, I want to open up to questions in a moment if anyone is wanting to send a question online. The hashtag is RSA Power. Last question from me, though. As the veteran of many years in the White House and on the campaign trail, relaxing must be something that you didn't do for many, many years.
Right.
How has your life changed since you left all of that, and what have you learnt about that world from stepping away from it?
Yeah, well, the thing is that I felt, prior to this, my mind was, utterly preoccupied moment to moment by every, dimension of the campaign, and it was incredibly consuming. And I thought about it all the time, but I wasn't able to think deeply about anything. And what's changed is now I can think more deeply about, what that was all about and the things that are happening in America. And that's what I was able to do in the process of the book. And I've been able to, my sister died last year, and I've been able to, partly through writing this book, and then the experience of doing a tour around it, incorporate my friends and family into, something I've done in my profession in a way I've never done before, and it's been incredibly rewarding. In every place I go, I didn't bring anybody with me this time, but I have people here that we've just been able to sort of celebrate the effort of the campaign as well as the effort my family put into my sister, and that's just been really meaningful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great questions. I'm going to take 3 at a time so we can get lots in. Yes, can I start with you in the white?
Thank you so much. Oh. Hi. Thank you so much, Jennifer. My question is, how do we get more women to support other women, not just women leaders, but in every sphere? Because this is not the case. I've worked mostly with women and in women empowering projects, and I face terrible bullying by other women. And I also see during the campaign, for example, many friends of mine that were women, despising Hillary and all of that. So I felt very hurt by that, and I always reflect how to get more women to support other women, because I think this is a critical issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And one behind you, was there?
Hi.
Yeah.
You said something really interesting for me, Jennifer, right at the beginning, where you said the only people who thought Trump was going to win were people of colour, black people. And I was just curious to know how that had informed your thinking later on.
Yep.
Okay, great question. Thank you. And we'll go a bit further along the line there to this. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you very much indeed. Could you think a little bit more, could I ask you to think a bit about the distinction between female and feminine, and whether or not feminine is important as well?
Interesting. Great. Thank you. So first off, how do we get women to be supportive to other women? Because some people have a boss who's a bitch, right? That's the question. Right?
Yeah. And it seems like colleagues, too. So this is, because gender bias isn't gender biased, and we experienced that a lot in the Clinton campaign, and what partly what happened was women, some women of her generation saw themselves reflected in her struggle, but more of them saw someone whose lives made no sense to them and something they could never achieve. And rather than rooting for her, they felt threatened by her, like, I could never do that, I'm not as smart as her. And that hurt us quite a bit. I have found in America in the last year and a half since Trump won, women supporting each other in ways in my own career that I've never seen before. And I think it's the most, I say in the book, like my most valuable lesson is just to women is just to speak up, because your voice matters, and if you don't look like everybody else in the room, your perspective matters more, not less, which I think is not our inclination. And that you got to back up other women. It's just, that Madeleine Albright is a hero of mine, and that is her big thing. There's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. And I believe in that. If I were super snarky, I would say, because that's what you're living, America. Here's your special place in hell. It's Donald Trump's presidency. But that's too snarky to say, so I don't say that. I don't. But yeah, it's disappointing to hear that you're experiencing that still, because I feel like actually in America we're all like locking arms and backing each other up.
The other point was about racism.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I was talking, one famous, I can't say who it is, but one famous black celebrity campaigned with us, and I said, America's just not going to like Donald Trump president, they're just not. And he said, I just see a different America than you do. And he said, I celebrate the 4th of July, but I don't really believe it. I believe that this country was founded with slavery at its core, and it needs to do better. And that was sort of the genesis for me of this notion of what everybody wanted, from like Black Lives Matter protesters to a white coal miner in Kentucky who lost his job and doesn't know what the future holds. It's like they all think America needs to own up to, the beginnings of slavery or the fact that the opportunity is not there. There's these 3 black mayors that I'm friendly with: Kasim Reed from Atlanta, Andrew Gillum from Tallahassee, who's running for Senate or running for governor of Florida, and Steve Benjamin, the Columbia mayor in South Carolina. And I was saying to them, they're like, they're making fun of me. I was like, we gotta rise up. They're like, yeah, Palmieri, yeah, Donald Trump, that's who wins in America, the super racist white guy with a lot of money. Like, yes, this is, so it has, I think it has for a lot of white women in particular, it's sort of given us a perspective where you see how, people of color experience their, what their perspective is like. And there seems to be something with the fact that there are so many communications platforms too, that's a positive, which I think is causing a lot of the turmoil and disruption, but ultimately positive, that there just seems to be a lot more empathy in America and trying to see things from each other's perspective. So I hope that's what comes out of this.
And on
Female and
versus
feminine, I got to tell you, I haven't really considered that. That's, I don't know that I have a good answer to that. I certainly consider myself feminine. I don't, and I think that there's qualities that, feminine qualities that qualities that we think of as feminine that I think probably reside in all of us, that if we brought them to politics and the workplace would allow us to bring our fuller selves. And what it seems, my impression is that we've had a really restricted, limited view of what it means to be a leader. And, qualities we think as feminine is like bringing compassion and a spirit of cooperation and, maybe, not a lot of interest in taking credit. Those are things that might help everyone, and things that qualities that men can adopt too. There was a lot of times in the Obama White House where I would stay late or do some kind of extra effort I would put into something, and one of my female colleagues would say, well, I don't know why you're doing that, a guy wouldn't do that. It's like, well, okay, but I don't want to be a guy. Like, it was important to me that I finish this job and do it well, and I want to do that, and I don't feel like a victim because I am. And I don't, the pinnacle of success that some of the men in the White House felt like, I don't want their idea of pinnacle success is not mine. And so I hope that we just bring more of ourselves to the world.
Thanks, great questions. Right, more questions. The one at the back, please. Thank you.
Hi, that sort of carries on from what you've just said. Do you think that in order to get more female leaders, our concept of what leadership needs to change to incorporate more of those feminine aspects? Or do you think it needs to be driven by candidates who already exhibit that to sort of normalise that before it changes from the top?
Great, thank you. And there's one at the back here.
My wife's nephew is in the British Army, and on an exchange visit to the US Staff College before the election, he found that the officers there saying they were all going to vote for Trump, didn't like Trump, but couldn't take the idea of a female commander-in-chief, which is a strange idea to a British officer.
Yeah.
Did that attitude spread beyond the military?
Right, okay.
Oh, right. And yes, at the front here, please. Thank you.
Hi, Bernadette. I was thinking about what you said that Hillary didn't have a story, and just, before, my question will be after this, but just to say that she does have a story now because she's the usher. it takes a lot more power to digest this experience than to win it. And on that note, I would like to ask you, what would be the best suggestion you have for the next female candidate? Like, what your experience and what the Hillary experience, what do you want to give to this woman?
Okay. So that's sort of similar to your question. I think your question was why women don't run, or why what more can
concepts of leadership need to change?
restrict them? Yeah, I think you have to engage in you got to meet voters where they are, right? And so in 2016, when Hillary ran for president in 2008, a lot of people didn't think there's a question if a woman could be commander-in-chief, a question that still exists. But in 2016, a majority of Americans, whether they voted for her or not, thought she was capable of doing all aspects of the job and thought she actually would be good at it, would actually be competent at it. They just didn't like her. But, so that is progress. We had to meet people where they were when it came to her and ambition. And so we had explained why she wanted the job, how she wanted to be in service to others, that was like the way you had to express ambition, as well as going to be in service to others. And so, but it was progress from 8. So I think that now women that are running for office, and what's good is that rather than molding themselves to, I need to have a certain kind of resume, we find women are running at all ages, younger women, women who are still in college, older women, and they're not waiting for their resumes to be perfect anymore, and they're just going. And I think that they will change, what we think of when we think of candidates. So I think at this, point, it's going to come from that ground up.
I think that answers that question as well.
And then Commander-in-Chief. I come from a military family. I come from a Navy family, 3 generations, and my family all voted for Hillary Clinton. But I have a brother-in-law and nephew. They're officers in the Navy, and there was, I'd say, at senior ranks, a lot of unease with the notion of Donald Trump as commander-in-chief, and some people left the military because of it. But when in the junior ranks, it was true that, I don't know if it was necessarily, I can't have a woman as a commander-in-chief, but there sure was a lot of, not this woman. There's a lot of that.
Okay, great. We can take some really short questions before we wrap up. There's a couple over here, please, and one right over here. Thank you.
Thank you. I was intrigued by what you said at the beginning about trying to bolt her brand, if you like, into a male sort of model.
Right.
And what you said at the end about, and I'm not being rude, but you gave this impression of the sort of nodding, sort of when people asked her questions, she didn't communicate or engage. And I wonder if that was part of the reason you used.
Right.
Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next one behind you.
Hello there. So I've been on the social media whilst this is happening, and someone has kindly let us know that the top 20 chats on YouTube are all male, all negative, and falling into abuse, including asking about when women are going to make his sandwiches. And I think that I just wanted to bring that up because there's something about female leadership and but these grassroots, these green shoots of female leaders rising up, and then actually there is a great problem that there are men who are quite violently trying to bring those people down. And I wondered about, like, as well as us taking on the responsibility to rise up, what we might be able to do, or what your suggestions might be able to do something about stamping that out.
Thank you. Also, freedom of speech to be Beavis and Butthead if you want to. Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things you kind of talked about, obviously, is the role that Hillary, being a woman, played in the election, but there was quite a significant group of women from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that didn't connect with Hillary, and you've touched on it a little bit. How much do you think across the wider kind of electorate it was socioeconomic factors that played quite a big role in the election?
Right, okay. Great. So the Hillary nodding and, presenting her as having these male qualities, I would say it was, I can only explain like what the experience was. It was very late in the campaign that it occurred to me what we had done. You know, we were just in our minds throughout the campaign is like we have to present her as somebody who is ready to be president of the United States, and that means all of these certain qualities. That means she's got to be strong. That means she can't be thrown off her game. That means she can't show emotion. And it was not until very late that when I really thought that through deeply, that I thought what that amounts to doing is making her this facsimile of qualities that you see in a man. So it was not as if there was a conscious effort, but I do think it is at the root of why, I think there's two things about why people don't find her inauthentic. One is because you're trying to jam these qualities on her and she couldn't react in a moment to be you know, in a way that you might in a more human moment. And then the other thing is that she was always in a role that was unfamiliar as for us to see a woman in, and that made her seem inauthentic. Okay, so yeah, so I'm very familiar with the online abuse of men, and we experienced it a lot in the Clinton campaign, and it came from the left and the right. And there's nothing more obnoxious than a left misogynist male who thinks that because he comes from the left, somehow he's really telling us things that are true as opposed to misogynistic, because obviously he's super open-minded. It's really, really disturbing. And the only thing positive I can say is that you know, at least we are like, this is unearthed, has any exist in the world, and women, you know, I have a community, a Twitter community online of like a society of women leaders, you know, from people that are fighting the NRA to a woman who runs this group called Grab Your Wallet, which is about which is like tells people to boycott misogynist, you know, organizations that are, you know, helping to back up bad conservative causes, and we defend each other and fight back each other. But it is like, it's a real thing, and I want to tell these men it's not pie. Just because women can do, you know, women doing better doesn't mean that you can't. But that is why in America, I think that you have to have this. We need to show, you need a president that is going to make sure that everybody feels, because right now we have a president that's pitting people against each other. That's how he survives. And that you have to show that you believe everybody's got a place, you know, in America, and then you can start to, you know, that those voices will be calmed. But it's really disturbing. I get it all the time. I just mute them. Because some people here, one of my colleagues here was like, the Twitter is here, but I was like, oh yeah, I just mute those people. Don't listen to it, it doesn't bother me. It's just like, really? Like, yeah, just mute them, it's fine. Yeah, don't listen to them.
And a quick final word
well,
on socioeconomic. We could do a whole session on that.
So that is, I mean, that's the root of Trump's appeal, right? I think was like, if you just take women out of the equation, because people are like, oh, well, all these white women voted for him. It's like, okay, well, most women didn't, by the way. Just because the people who voted for Hillary weren't white doesn't mean they don't matter, people. I find it so weird that I get asked about the 50% of white women that voted for him. But that is how politics has changed in America. You know, it is what we traditionally think of as the Republican Party with a particular conservative economic policy is not the people that vote for them. And it felt to me as if there were you know, the people who were resistant, who had extraordinary economic dislocation come to their hometowns, and unlike other times in America when you would normally leave, they didn't leave, and they're staying in their hometowns because they find their places of community, their community to be a place of value to them, even without the opportunity. And that's new in America, right? Like, people are less mobile, like literally. They don't move as much as they used to, and they're economically not mobile, and that's like a huge problem. And those were the voters that went for Trump, and that's why I think the next Democrat's got to have a much broader, be able to not just have, because Hillary had one, but be able to break through with the economic vision that's going to show where everybody fits in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for all of your great questions.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
really
much to
great.
everyone watching online. Jennifer will be sticking around. Please do grab a copy of this brilliant book and chat further to Jennifer. All I want to say is make your own sandwiches. I think that's important. And thank you so much to you and to Jennifer Palmieri.